Hey guys, welcome back to the showroom of the shop here. I'm sitting in front of the EZ-One Woodworking Center. I had a customer call me today and he was asking me questions about making drawers, size, drawer bodies for cabinetry. And one of the things when he was using the SSRK, he wanted to be able to trap the drawer parts between the four six-way stops that come with the EZ-One Woodworking Center. The only thing with the six-way stops, and let me grab one here, is he's working with half-inch material. And just ever so slightly, the knob that locks in the six-way stop here, this little knob, is just sitting proud of his material, so the SSRK wasn't able to, run across it because it was kind of bumping into that knob. So he asked me for some solutions. What is a solution? How can I make, my drawer sides to be able to route my rabbets and the little groove for the drawer bottoms and everything. And so I gave him a couple of suggestions and everything, and he said, I just, I don't know. He said, is there a simpler way to do it? And I thought to myself, I said, well, let me look at it for a minute. So I sat back and I was thinking, what would I do? And if I was making drawer sides, it's constantly the same, no matter what size, whether it be a shallow drawer or a deep drawer. What would I do? Well, what I would do is I would make a jig. I would make a drop-in module, because the great thing about the open top design of the EZ-One Woodworking Center is you can drop in 3/4 inch stock, whether it be MDF or plywood, and create a solid work surface. And you can also use it to drop in, create drop-in modules or jigs and setups. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, I said to myself, well, if I'm going to show Marvin, and Marvin, this is for you, I said, if I'm going to show Marvin how to do this or how to create this jig, there might be other people out there that have an EZ-One Woodworking Center and the Super Smart Routing Kit that, might find this jig useful. So I thought I would go ahead and film it and walk you guys through this step. We're going to make this quick and simple jig, and it will allow us to do all of our routing on our drawer sides. I keep saying slides, but our drawer sides and everything, our drawer bodies, with the EZ-One Woodworking Center and this one jig. And now this jig is going to be set up specifically for working with half-inch material, but of course it can work with all half-inch, 3/4, whatever you may need. So first thing I'm going to do is I've got a sheet of oak plywood here. It can be anything MDF. I just happen to have a lot of oak plywood on hand. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to square this up, and I'm going to take a rip cross cut off of it, and I'm going to get the end squared up, and then I'm going to cut my drop-in module down to size, and then we'll start assembling, making the jig, kind of in the groups and all. So enjoy, and let's see if we can get this done. Alright, so now that I made the first cross cut, I was able to go ahead now and flip my sheet 90 degrees with that fresh cut up against my reference fence here. Now I can go ahead and rip it, and then I have a true 90-degree corner to work off of to get my drop-in module cut down to size. Once I get this rip cut done, then I'll be able to determine what's the size materials I'm going to be working with and how I want to set up the jig, and we'll just take it one step at a time. Alright, so now that I have a square corner and everything to work off of and to reference off of, I'm ready to cut my drop-in module down to its final size. Now this is where I determine, what's the longest drawer piece that I would work with. And I think the biggest drawer that I would make, the deepest drawer that I would make, let's say, would probably be around 24 inches. So I went ahead and I marked my piece at 28 inches. That gives me an extra 4 inches for my drop-in module to allow for the parts of kind of the internal parts of the jig that we're going to make. That 4 inches will give me plenty of room to do the things that we're about to do in the next coming steps. So now that I've made that mark, all I have to do is just slide right up to my zero reference line, my anti-tip edge, drop my guide rail down right on it, and I'm going to get it cut. Alright, so this is going to be the base of my jig, and I'm going to set it aside for a moment over here on the workbench. And I'm going to take the rest of these pieces here, and I need to make a fence. And I know my cut line is nice and true, so I want my fence to be 2 inches. I'm actually going to flip this over because I like my offcuts coming off of the right side of the table. So make sure I get my reference right. Go 2 inches. Alright, so I went ahead and I ripped 2 of these 2-inch fences, and one of them will be the fence, the other one I'm about to cut up. The length of them doesn't matter. These are 23 3/8, the same width as my base for my jig, so that'll be just fine. But on one of the fences, I need to cut it down into 2 pieces, and basically the first piece is just going to be a small lip, so I can create like a little 90 reference point. So we'll do that, and then the other 2 parts are going to be part of the moving parts on the jig. So the first thing, I don't really need a lot of fence out here, so I will, let's go with 8 inches. 8 inches sounds good, doesn't it? It's a great thing about building jigs. You can, you know, doesn't have to be specific unless you really want it to be, because I know exactly the function that I need this jig to do and the job I need it to perform. So I like building as you go. So we'll get that first one at 8 inches, and then we'll figure out what we need the other 2 at. So again, I'll just slide this over. And if you notice in the table now, and I'm going to move the camera up here in just a minute, I've got my offcut from earlier. I've got it laying in the table as kind of a drop-in module itself, just to create a solid surface here so I can work with these small parts easier. And on this remaining piece, what we got left over here, 15 1/4. So I'm just basically going to split that right in half and go 7 5/8. Double check from this side. 7 5/8. This time I want the blade to split right down the middle. So I'm going to be off of my 0 reference point a little bit. Alright, so there are the the 4 parts that I need for my jig. Alright, so now that the 4 parts are cut for my jig, and that's all the cutting that I need to do with the saw, I want to go ahead and switch over to the SSRK, the router, and because everything else I'm going to do with it. And what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and take out this temporary little drop-in module that I set in here. Set it aside. I'm going to slide my center rail back, and I'm going to actually drop in my my jig base as the drop-in module, and I'm going to make all the parts and route everything right in place. That way I know that I'm getting a true reference of what I'm working off of, and I'll explain that in just a minute. Alright, well, as I said, I went ahead and took the base of my jig and I dropped it down into the EZ-One table. And now a quick note on that EZ-One table, if you're not aware, any 3/4 inch material, MDF, plywood, melamine, creates, when it's dropped down into the sliding rails of the EZ-One, creates a nice flat surface. So that's how you can convert your EZ-One table into a workbench and have, you know, both a cutting table and a workbench at the same time. Now on my jig here, I've got some hardware and the parts that I cut earlier. We'll get a little closer and I'll go over it with you. I think all together on this jig, you know, with the materials, the sheet of 3/4 inch plywood, the sheet of 1/2 inch plywood, and the little bit of hardware, all together it was like $24. Now, one thing I do want to make a note of is off camera, I realized I made a little bit of an error, a boo-boo. If you remember, I cut 2 3/4 inch by 2 inch long strips. And one of those strips I needed to cut down into some small pieces. Well, if you recall at the beginning of the video, I said I was going to be working with 1/2 inch material. You know, this jig is specifically going to be made for making drawers out of 1/2 inch material. And you can use it for 3/4 inch material, but that's its main purpose is for using with 1/2 inch. Well, the small pieces that I cut out of that long strip of 3/4 inch material, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted these 3 small pieces, and they're still 2 inches wide, but they're probably about 8 inches long. The length of them really doesn't matter, that's kind of up to you. But I wanted those out of 1/2 inch material, and I'll tell you why. Now my long fence, my 2 inch wide long fence, I still want that out of 3/4 inch material. And again, in just a second, I'll explain to you why that is. Alright, so let's get a little closer. I've got my SSRK, my Super Smart Routing Kit, sitting on the EZ-One. I've got a couple of X limit stops that we're going to set up here in just a minute. Let me show you what we're dealing with, and then we'll get right into it. Alright, quick and simple. I've got some wood screws here. I've got 5 of them. I only need 2 for my little cross piece and 3 for my fence, and you can go more than that, but I just need 5 1-inch wood screws. And then I've got 4 1/4 inch by 1 inch just panhead, you know, Phillips panhead screws. And I've got 4 little T-nuts. And all this stuff you can pick up at a local hardware. And that's all we're going to need to put this jig together. The reason for, now with the panheads and everything, is so we can countersink them into, you know, our sliding parts and everything. So that way we have a nice flat surface, that's the whole purpose of making this jig, that our SSRK can run back and forth on and not get caught up on anything. So that's it for the hardware, just that simple little bit. Again, I've got 3 1/2 inch pieces. They're 2 inches wide, 8 inches long, and then I have my 23 3/8 by 2 inch 3/4 inch fence. It's going to be my main reference fence, and again I'll explain to you why that's 3/4 inches in just a second. Alright, first and foremost, before I start routing into my base of my jig and creating my jig, I want to set up my X limit stops. And the X limit stops, they snap right onto the guide rail of the table, and they limit the X axis movement. And what I want to limit is I want to make sure that when I'm routing this groove that I'm about to route in here, or all the grooves I'm about to route in here, that I don't run into my aluminum cross rail here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to take my SSRK all the way to its max limit. And I'll move over to the side so I can see where my bit is. Make sure that alright. once I've gotten that distance there, I'm going to take my X limit stop and I'm going to butt it right up on my SSRK. I'm going to take my little Allen key, which is always hiding in my pocket. Look, 2 pencils. Always running out of pencils. Alright, we'll take the Allen key and I'm just going to lock this down onto the guide rail in place. Alright. I'm going to slide my SSRK down to the other end and do the same thing. Touch that X limit stop right up to it. And now my distance of travel is limited by those X limit stops. So I can't go any further or than I want to. And on the SSRK itself, you may not be able to see these, but we'll get up closer. I have Y limit stops that I can lock down, and that limits my travel on my Y-axis. Alright, so right now the jig that I'm going to set up, and I can move it out and in wherever I want to set it into, but the position it's in, I'm going to be able to work with drawer parts that are anywhere from 1 inch wide to about 10 inches wide, 10 inch wide drawer parts, and that's pretty deep drawer. But anywhere in that range, I'll be able to work with any drawer parts that I need to do. And I'll be able to, I like to assemble my drawers with rabbet joints, and that's one of the things that Marvin had mentioned. He did all of his rabbet joints on his drawer parts. And of course, cutting that groove on the bottom of each drawer for the drawer bottom. So we're going to work and assume that, we're going to deal with rabbet joinery. Right now in the SSRK, I've got a 1/2 inch router bit. And that's going to be important to know the dimension of that router bit because it's going to help us when we are setting up for the fence. Now the reason why I'm using 3/4 inch material here is I'm actually going to route a 2 inch wide groove in the base here to recess this down, and when it's recessed, just that little 1/4 inch, it's going to be flush with my 1/2 inch, fences and my other little parts and everything. So that, by doing that, I'm going to ensure that everything that I reference up against this fence is true to the travel and the distance of my guide rail. So by routing this groove and then setting this fence down into, I am getting parallel with my fence. My fence is going to be dead parallel with my guide rail and SSRK. So no matter what I reference up to it, I'm always going to get true cuts. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my SSRK. I'm going to come out here and max out my maximum Y-axis just to see where I'm at. And I'm going to make a small pencil mark at the far end away from the guide rail of my bit. Where my bit will stop cutting. And then I'm going to come in all the way up against my guide rail and make another mark on this side closest to the guide rail of my router bit. And that's kind of my distance of travel. Now of course my distance of travel this way can change any time by simply just sliding my jig out anywhere that I want to. So we'll go ahead and since I moved that, we'll go back and make sure that nothing has changed, and it did a little bit, so let me bring this back out right there. All right. So here's my line here, and what I want to do is when I'm routing, I want to be able to route into this board a little bit. Maybe I want to use it to be able to set my depth stops and everything. So I'm just going to, probably about 1/4, 3/8 of an inch, somewhere around there. Nothing major. But that's where I'm going to be routing my fence. So what I want to do is I'm going to get about where I want. And on this side here, I'm going to draw a line. Okay? And on this side here, I'm going to draw a line. Alright? So now I have some lines to reference off of. What's the next step, you say? Well, here's what I say. I am going to start my groove on this outside line. Go ahead and get a groove, and then we'll move in, and we're going to route out a 2-inch wide channel on here. And you say, well, wait a minute, that center line that you just made on the board, that's as far as your router bit went over. How are you going to get over to this line to make a groove? Well, that's really simple. We're going to just sit there and we're going to raise the bridge a little bit, and we're going to slide the whole jig over. So that way I can get out to my groove and move this out of the way. Now my line's in here, and the center of my router bit is in here, so now I can route that groove up and I can always move it back. That's where I want to start. And I know it's hard to see in the light, sorry about that. And sorry I don't have my lav mic on, so about the audio. But I wasn't planning on shooting a video tonight, but I thought I would help Marvin out by making this jig. Alright, with the outside of my router bit, to the furthest outside, on the inside edge of that line, I'm going to take my Y limit stops and I'm going to slide them right up to the base of the SSRK and kind of lock it into place that way. It'll come in handy in just a minute to kind of set my stops while I'm cleaning out this wide 2-inch groove. So I got them both up against the fence here and locked down. Alright, with my router into position, I've got my Y limit stops here. I've got them right up against the base and locked down on both sides, and that'll come in handy in just a minute. I've also got my Y axis locked in, so there's no movement there as well. And this on the SSRK, this is the handle. You got one hand on the router, one hand on your base, and this is how you can control your movement. All right, so with that locked in, you can see that. This will come in handy. I'll show you how these Y limit stops come in handy with setting like flute distances and such grooves, such as we're about to do. Little tips and tricks that'll help you out. All right, so with that set, we're ready to go ahead and create our first groove. I've already got my depth set for the plunge, for how deep I need to go into my jig, and here we go. Alright, so with the first part of the groove done, we're ready to finish it up. But we want to make sure that the groove, whether it be a groove, a dado, a rabbit, anything, we want to make sure that we get a nice fit, like a glove, each and every time. And that's where the Y limit stops come in so handy on the SSRK. So what I've done is I've taken and got a scrap piece of wood, and I cut it the same width as our fence. And we're going to utilize that in just a second. But if you recall, in my router, I've got a 1/2-inch router bit already. So I've got to account for that router bit's, the thickness of the router bit. So I've got a piece of 1/2-inch material here as well. And I'm about to show you the 2-step process to get a perfect groove. Now, if I wanted to make it a 1-step process, I would have said, okay, I got a 1/2-inch router bit in here. My fence is exactly 2 inches wide. I need to just get a scrap piece of wood that's 1.5 inches. And I could have done it with just 1 step, but this 2-step process is just as simple. And this would apply not only for this groove, but like I said, rabbits, dados, everything. It makes it to where you have that perfect fit each and every time. So let's get a little closer. Let me show you exactly what I'm going to do here. Alright, so I want to make sure that my groove is an exact glove fit. And I've got my Y limit stops here. I've got my scrap piece of wood that represents the width of my fence. And I want my router to move in towards the guide rail, for cutting the rest of the groove. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with the Y limit stop that is between the fence of the base and the router. And I'm going to take it, I'm going to loosen it up and slide it back. And I'm going to take my mock-up fence here, my little scrap piece that represents my fence, and put it up against that base here. And then I'm going to slide my Y-limit stop right up to it and lock it down into place. And then I can move this out of the way. Now, if I loosen this and moved over to that Y-limit stop, I'd have a groove, but it would be a 1/2 inch too wide because I have a 1/2 inch router bit and I need to account for that router bit. So what I need to do is I need to move my router and everything back out a 1/2 inch, and that's what this 1/2 inch scrap is representing to there. And now I'm going to take and tighten my 2 knobs that lock my Y-axis. I'll lock those just like that, and I can move this out of the way. And with those locked, now I can't move on my Y-axis. So I'm going to go ahead and take my Y-limit stop and I'm going to slide it right up to it and lock it down. So now, if I loosen this up, my limit of travel is the width of my groove on my Y-axis. So with that, I'll be able to route my second route and then go ahead and clean out the center and everything. So let's go ahead and do it now. Alright, so now with this groove routed out, before I change any of my settings on my SSRK, I'm going to check a couple things. First of all, I'm going to check my fit, and I mean, that is a nice fit. I mean, just a little bit of pressure to go in there, perfect fit. And then when it's in, I'm going to check my height and make sure that I've got my 1/2 inch, that everything is nice and flush. Look at that. So perfect height, perfect depth and everything. So now what I need to do, and let me back this camera up a little bit. So now what I need to do on the back side of the groove here, I just need to take a little chisel and square off the corners from the rounded round bit. And up here at the lead, I've got just a little hairline, and I'll lift this up so you can kind of see. I've got just a little lip of material right there for where my limit stop kept me from going into my aluminum. Just need to clean that up with a chisel and straighten that out, and I can drop this in. Alright, so now I have this fence in here. Now I'm not going to screw it in just yet. We'll do all the final screwing of the fence and everything at the very end. We'll screw everything together. Right now I want to take one of my 1/2 inch pieces of material, and on the far end here I want to butt it right up next to the end of the fence, and I'll get closer so you can see. But I want to take a square, a known square that I have, and I want to make sure that that fence gets put square. I want to make sure that this fence is flush on the end of the jig and 90 degrees to this fence. And this fence is going to act as a stop, and basically it's just going to get 2 wood screws. We're going to screw it into place. I'll do that in just a minute. We'll do it towards the end when we screw this fence down here. We'll put the screws in there, but first we got a couple of grooves that we need to make for the sliding fences. And I'm going to back up a little bit, and I'm going to kind of show you the concept of what it's all going to look like when it goes together. But that's where this 1-2 piece 1/2 inch piece is going to go. We got a nice smooth flat transition and everything here, so the depth of our groove for this 3/4 inch fence is perfect. And with it being recessed in there, now I know that this is going to be a true parallel to my guide rail, and my SSRK is going to be traveling on a just top notch. Alright, so let me move the SSRK out of the way for a minute. Set it aside on the bench over here. And I'll give you the kind of basic rundown of what our next steps are going to be. We're going to have two fences here. We're going to have a fence that travels along the edge here, and it can trap our, drawer pieces so they can't move when they're routing and everything, no matter how long or how deep. And remember, I said the longest piece, the longest drawer, the biggest drawer I'd be working with is about 24 inches. And it gives me plenty of room to get a 24-inch piece of material in here to lock into place. This last half-inch piece is going to be able to move this way too. When we slide our work piece up there, we'll be able to trap it into place and secure it down so we can do our routing, and it's not going to move whatsoever, and we can register our same pieces. And because of the travel on this, we'll be able to get up to anywhere between 8 and 10 inches wide boards for deep drawers. If you wanted to go deeper, you just take the whole jig and you slide it out, and you go as far back as you want. Now I'm not going to run my grooves all the way back, but you can, just so you can be able to do that. I'm just going to work with what I've got here. So what we're going to do is we're going to route 2 grooves, so I can put 2 screws in this fence so I can keep it nice and square. You can even do one right in the center if you wanted to, but I want to make sure that it doesn't do this, even though I'm registering up against this fence. I want to make sure it doesn't do that. So I'm going to put 2 here. So what I want to do first is I want to go ahead and, while I've got this fence kind of pressed into place, I want to go ahead and register this piece up against it. And I want to figure out where I want my, screws and my holes. Let's see, I'll put this one here. And what I can do is just transfer those marks. Doesn't have to be exact, it's not rocket science. We're building a jig. Alright, so that gives me my 2 grooves. My screws that are going to be traveling, and my T-bolt that's going to be on the bottom side is a 1/4 inch T-nut, and you got to account for the sleeve on that T-nut to be able to slide through. So I'm going to go ahead and do a bit change. We're going to put a 1/4 inch router bit in the router in the SSRK. We can go ahead temporarily and slide these things out of the way. We'll route our grooves, and then we'll flip this whole thing over and route a wider, shallower groove on the bottom side to create a place for the T-nut to sit in that catches almost like a little T-track from the underside. Let's go ahead and get all that done now. Go ahead and unplug the router while I do this bit change, and just wanted to mention that if this is one of your first time watching one of my videos or anything, and you're not familiar with me or my channels that I have on YouTube, one of the things that you can tell from this video is I go into a lot of detail, and sometimes maybe too much detail, or what have you. I don't believe there's no such thing as too much detail, because I'd much rather give you a lot of detail than leave you with a lot of questions. By the time you finish watching this video, you should be able to go out to your shop, no questions asked, and build this jig like that. And that's what my hope is. And again, I hate for you to come across something and go, oh, well, how do I do this? Or I wonder how he did this or how he did that. So I go into a bit of detail. People say I talk too much, but it's just me. All right. Alright, I went ahead and repositioned my X limit stops for the length of the groove. So I have basically a stop groove for the length that I want. And now I'm going to set my first mark. Let me get over to it here. I'm going to put the router bit right on the center of that first mark, and I'm going to lock my Y stop in place so I can't go any further. This 1/4 inch with a 1/4 inch drill bit, this is going to be a through hole. We're going to go all the way through on both grooves. I'll check my T-nut in the sleeve on my T-nut, make sure I got good sliding capabilities with my hardware and stuff, make sure there's not going to be anything held up. If by chance it is, because it's a 1/4 20 bolt and I got a 1/4 inch bit, then I'll just make a slight adjustment and just widen my grooves ever so slightly so I got a nice motion and everything. And from there we'll move on to the next step. So just wanted to give you a quick rundown. Here we go. Before I move on to the next groove, because it'll help me in my setup for the other grooves, I'm going to go ahead and check my hardware. I know for definite that my 1/4 20 bolt's going to fit through there. It's the little sleeve on the T-nut that I want to make sure of. And yep, just needs to be widened just a little bit to account for that sleeve. And so what I'm going to do is I've got my Y limit stops again locked into position on that single groove. I'm just going to bump either one, doesn't matter. On this particular step, I want to bump this back just a hair. Just to open up that groove a little bit more. That groove is absolutely perfect for the sleeve of the T-nut. There is no play whatsoever side to side, yet I get a nice smooth motion back and forth. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a third groove right next to this here, and on this piece we'll actually use our jig to be able to route our dado. We'll get our jig and all set up. We'll make this piece last, this little fence last, and it will be able to travel the length of that third groove, and then with this slot it will be able to move in that perpendicular motion to trap the wood up against the fence. And again, because my X limit travel is limited by the guide rail here, and I can't get back to where I want to be able to route this groove, you just simply move the modular out away from the guide rail. And if it's under the guide rail, just slide it out. And then that gives you room to make your third groove. So to keep things looking nice, jig should look nice. I'll roughly estimate from center to center, I'm at 3 1/4 inches, center to center of this groove. So what I want to do is, from the center of this groove, we'll go, get that about centered, looks good. we'll go 3 1/4 as well. Keep things looking good. Slide over and make our last pass. Same thing, no side-to-side play, but excellent movement in there for that T-nut. Now, did you notice something? I really want you guys that use the SSRK to understand something. When you are steering or driving the SSRK, the hand that's on the base, on these 2 knobs of the base, that is what you're moving your router with. This hand here, you know, you're not putting any pressure because you could, you know, don't try to drive with this hand. Drive with it on the guide rail. That's the whole perfect setup about it. This hand here is just barely on it, you know, just to keep it out of the way of moving things, you know, do something with it. But you can really just kind of, a lot of people try to drive with the router because they're used to working with the router. They'll put both hands on the router and everything, and you're really not gaining the benefit of the guide rail because you can skew things. So just drive with your hand on the base. That's your back and forth motion. All right. So that being said, that was just a little quick tip. Now we can pull the SSRK off. We've got all 3 of our grooves routed, and now we need, on the bottom side, we need to create a little channel in each of these grooves for this T-nut to be able to fit into, and then also to, you know, be able to lock, you know, when you turn it. We're going to create a little T-track. So very simple process. All we're going to do is we are going to flip this end over end. So we got the bottom side here, and with that, everything is reversed. Your front side is now your back side, your back side is now your front side. So we'll readjust our limit stops to make sure that we are stopping in the exact positions we want to stop when we do our travel. But all we're going to do, I mean, we are just creating a small little opening, shallow, just very shallow, just enough for that T-nut to be able to sit flush with the surface of the wood. And we're going to create a little opening there, so let's go ahead and do that. Alright, on the first groove, this T-nut here, the base of the T-nut is exactly 1/2 inch wide. Now I could put a 3/4 inch bit in it and make 1 pass on each one, bam bam bam, be done with it. I don't have a 3/4 inch router bit on hand right now. I just have the 1/2 inch that we started with and the 1/4 inch. Well, rather than do a bit change, all I'm going to do is I'm going to utilize my limit stops again, so I can move over to the left of the groove slightly and over to the right of the groove slightly, and I'll do that for each groove. Alright, so for the X limit stops on my T-nut, I need to, you know, basically, this T-nut, the length of it, it's got a long flange on it. If you can see the T-nut here, it's got a long flange. The length of this T-nut is 1 1/4 inches all the way through. So with the center being, you know, 5/8, I want to be able to get the most travel out of my bolt, which is the center there. So I want to make sure that this little T-slot groove runs beyond the grooves that are my through grooves. So I want a shallow groove that runs beyond that, just so I can get the maximum travel from end to end on my T-nut. So basically I've got to extend 5/8 of an inch past the end of each groove. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and measure that out on one of the grooves. Just take and get on one of my inch marks here somewhere and go 5/8. Same thing on the other end. Get on just one of the inch marks here and go 5/8. And that will be my start and stop points. So now I can take my router, bring it all the way back to that stop point, and set my X limit stop so I don't travel beyond that. Alright, so this one's done. Let's lock it into place. Guys, you can knock this jig out rather quickly. The video is a little bit extended because I'm going through a lot of explanation. Like I said, I don't want to leave you with any questions. I want you to be able to make this jig. We're going to make a drawer when all is said and done. When the jig is done, we're going to make some drawer. And we're going to, so I can show you the use of the jig. So we'll get this out here, 5/8 of an inch. Bring my X limit stop up to the router and lock it into place. There we go. Alright, so now I've got X limit travel, so I'll get the perfect consistency all across all three grooves. Go ahead and get everything alright. So on my groove, I've got the bit in the center, and then from the right side of the groove, I've got the router bit all the way as far over as it needs to go. From the left side of the groove, I've got my Y limit stop. So now I've got my limits on where I need to route this little shallow channel. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to set my depth stop to make just a very shallow groove, enough for that T-bolt to sit flush. Alright, so now I have a place for my T-nut to be able to travel in the slot, and then as it tighten or loosen, it can lock into place just like a little T-track. So there we go. Now you can make your groove a little narrower if you wish, if you don't want it to twist that much, but that for me is exactly what I want. And I basically went a 1/4 inch on this side of the groove and a 1/4 inch on that side of the groove. Makes things quick and simple. Alright, so we just need to repeat the steps for the other two grooves, and then we can put the jig together completely. Alright guys, with all the hard work done, all we have to do now is throw this thing together and put it together. One of the things you need is a screw gun or a screwdriver, a square, Phillips screwdriver, and a countersink bit comes in handy. So what all we're going to do now is we're going to get the fence and we'll press it into place, screw it from the bottom, screw the 90-degree fence on up here. We'll drill and countersink our 2 holes for our sliding fence, and then for the perpendicular sliding fence, we'll actually use the jig to route the groove in there. and everything. So let's go ahead and get it done. So for the fence up here, I'm just going to use one of my hold downs. And my square. For this one, I'm just going to screw through the top down and just make sure that the screws are recessed. These are self-drilling screws, so no need to pre-drill. Nice. Alright. And just need to grab a 1/4 inch drill bit. I want to countersink these holes so that the screws sit flush. And just take our T-bolt. So this isn't a toolless jig. You need a screwdriver to be able to loosen the fence up to slide back and forth, and then, you know, to lock it into place. You know, quick and simple. It's not a major thing. All right, so the third T-bolt will go here. We'll go ahead and get our, we can move this hold down out of the place. Take all the tools, set them aside. And now for the perpendicular hold down, we'll go ahead and get a little bit wider one. I'll cut it down in a minute. I've already got a mark here where to cut it down to. I want to be able to go all the way up to it and then back if I need to. So on the length of this, we'll cut it off just about an inch past the outside of the groove. That'll be our cut mark. I'll slide the jig out of the way for a second. Move that X limit stop. Alright, so we need to go ahead and route a groove down the center of this that'll give it that perpendicular motion. So I'm actually going to use the jig to do that. I'm basically going to take it and put it up against my fence, both fences, my 90-degree fences, and I'm going to take my sliding fence here. Loosen it up, bring it right up to it. Basically trapping it in place. Now I can bring my SSRK over. And the great thing about the Super Smart Routing Kit is you have X, Y, and Z axis movement. We need to adjust the Z axis because now we're riding up a ½ inch above the guide rail. So these two bolts back here, go ahead and drop the track on. I want to make sure that the base is sitting flat. Get on top of your material with your router base. Make sure it's sitting flat and everything is flat all the way across. And now we have our movement and everything. So I'm going to go ahead and slide the jig just a little bit further under. Okay. And pull this out of the way while I mark my slots. And again, I'm going to set my X limit stops and everything. I want this to be a stop groove. I don't want it going all the way, from end to end. So basically, I'm going to go stop a ½ inch from each end. Find my center. This is 3 1/8 inches wide, so half of that is 1 9/16. Double check myself. Okay. Drop that router bit, center of the router bit right on the center of that mark I just made. Lock it down. We just need to be moving back and forth. Alright, so got that bit right on the center of that mark, and now I just need to set my X limit stops. And they just snap right onto the guide rail. So we'll come up here. Down to the mark here, slide this limit stop up to it and lock it down. Alright, so now that I have my X limit stops, I've got my router's Y limit stop locked in place so I can't move anywhere. I'm going to go ahead and route this groove. Now I'm going to route the groove halfway, and then we're going to flip the piece end over end and route it the rest of the halfway. That way I'm not, routing through my jig. Alright, here we go. my piece and flip it end over end. And just like that, we've got that groove all the way through our fence piece. So right now, we can remove this X-limit stop for a moment. Go ahead and loosen this up, slide it out of the way, and get our T-nut and bolt. And we want that bolt to sit flush in there, and I don't have a chamfer bit. Thank you. About to lose the name there. I don't have a chamfer bit, so what I need to do is I'm just going to route that groove just a little bit wider, enough, just very shallow, just enough for that head to sit recessed in that wood. So just quick and simple. I'll put everything back the way it was. And just on that top part, I need to create a shallow groove. So, doesn't have to be much. I'll go ahead and about 1/8 of an inch. Slide over to one side a bit. And I've already set my depth. All right, knock it out real quick. Alright. That allows that screw to sit just right below the surface. And go ahead and get the nut underneath. There you go. So now we've got movement. We can move this all the way down. I can get a 24-inch stick in here, and here I've got movement all the way to and further beyond. All I have to do is raise up my guide rail, and I can go back as far as I need to. When I'm not using it for whatever, I can just bring it down here out of the way. Just out of the way. Alright guys, well that is making this little drawer jig, and it works out great. Like it worked out great just to make a part of the jig, the little groove inside that perpendicular sliding fence. Now the great thing about the perpendicular sliding fence is, when I don't need it, I can just slide it out of the way. And this fence here, the parallel fence, I can bring it all the way back, and I've got room to work with my 24-inch length drawer pieces. Now if I want to work with longer drawers or what have you, this jig can be extended out, all the way to the full length of the table if you want to. But let's go ahead. I've got some sides and some pieces, 1/2-inch material cut for drawer parts. Let's do some rabbets on the front and the back of the drawer, and on the sides we'll go ahead and all four sides we'll cut the little groove for the drawer bottom. Alright guys, I've got my drawer parts here. I've got my front and back and my two sides. First thing we're going to do is on the front and back pieces we're going to route the 1/2 inch wide rabbets 1/4 inch deep on both sides, and then on all four pieces we're going to route a 1/4 inch groove on all four pieces for the bottom panel. The first thing I'm going to do is, in my router I've got a 1/2 inch router bit for the rabbets. When I'm done with the rabbets I'll switch over to the 1/4 inch router bit, switch my setup to route the grooves, and we'll be done. I'm going to focus you basically on the jig so you can see everything that's going on and everything. You'll notice that in my sliding fence here and my fixed fence, that with the router bit I'm cutting a little bit into both of those when I'm routing the rabbet, and that's fine. This jig is set up for 1/2 inch material, so it kind of does two things for me. One, that's where I'll always be routing my rabbets for my drawer fronts and backs, and also it'll be like an automatic depth stop for me. I can just go to one of those little fences and drop right down to it and lock my depth set in, and I'll be set at a 1/4 inch. So don't say, oh no, you're cutting into the jig. That's why I made it. That's all these quick things that'll help me with quick setups. Watch what I'm doing, and you can just take this principle and you can apply it to all of your drawer fronts. These drawers, this drawer is 4 inches wide. These drawers are 4 inches wide, but wider drawers, narrower drawers, the principles are all the same for all of them. So let's go ahead and go through this so you can see what I'm doing. Alright, before I get started I'm going to take my two sides, and I can set them right here on the jig out of the way. And I've got my front and back. Now I'm going to talk you through a little bit of the setup here, and then I'm just going to route right through. First things first, the front and the back, I'm going to turn them sideways so I can route my rabbit. I'm going to put one up there. I'm going to put both up there. That way I can make both rabbits at the same time. When I'm done making this rabbit, all I'm going to do is turn the pieces around. Since I already have my router setting, make my next pass and make my next rabbit. Now, I'm not using the little fence on the back side. I'm actually using the guide rail as my stop to trap it into position here. All I'm going to do is take my sliding fence and trap those into position, lock it down with my screwdriver so they can't move, and I'm going to set up my router. Make sure you get your depth set to 1/4 inch for your plunge, and I went ahead and set my X limit stops to allow me to route 1/4 inch into this fence and 1/4 inch into that fence. That way I get a clear pass on my rabbits, and then I have some reference points for future bit settings. With the router, and let's move these sides just off the bench for a minute so you don't get confused as to what's going on. With the router in position, I've got the side of the router bit that is facing the guide rail. I got the router bit turned sideways, and I have the edge of the router bit, the furthest left edge from me, my left, on the very end of the boards. Just barely kissing the end of the boards. I've got my Y limit stops locked into place. I've got a piece of 1/2 inch material, which is the same as my drawer material, that I'm going to use to set my first rabbit setup. I'm going to take this Y limit stop here and I'm going to slide it back. I'm going to put this piece into place, bring my stop right up to it, and lock it into position. Now all I have to do is slide up to that stop, lock everything down, and I'm ready to go to make a perfect fitting rabbit for my side pieces. Now there might be just a little hair of material on the very end of the board. I want that. I like it a little bit proud, just a very small amount proud, so I can sand everything nice and flush and get a real nice clean looking project. So with that being said, that's all I need to tell you as far as the setup on doing the rabbets. Doing the groove is basically very straightforward, and you'll be able to see everything in the video and understand what I'm doing. Alright, here we go. So there are my front and back the drawers done, and again, nice fit. And let's get a little closer so you can see that. This is my 1/2 inch piece here. So for my rabbets, a nice fit. If I'm, I can't even mic that as far as how, the proudness. There's just a little bit. Perfect for sanding. So there's the rabbets, quick and easy. Front and back of the drawers are done. We can set them aside and grab our sides. Now we're going to cut the groove in all 4 sides. First thing I'm going to do is, I'll just go ahead and start with one of the drawer sides. Got to take and lock this into place. Once I get the first setup done, all the other 3 or the 3 cuts are the same. So we'll go ahead and don't forget there's a bit change that's got to be done. I still got my 1/2 inch bit in the router. We'll do that in just a moment. This X limit stop is going to stay where it is because that's where the end of my jig. I don't need to go any further this way. The only adjustment that I would make is on this limit stop that's closest to me. So I'm just going to come right past my slot. And this will be the setting on the X limit stop for the 2 shorter sides, the front and the back. Alright, so let's do a quick bit change. Alright, I've made the bit change. Well, as far as setting the depth, I'm just going to use the depth of the rabbets on this short piece and also the little bitty rabbet, the little cut in I did on the fence there. All I have to do is either go to one side or the other and drop my router down till it kisses the top of that, and then lock my depth into place. Alright, so that's done. I've got my depth stop set to make my groove. Now I just need to set my Y limit, and I want my grooves from the bottom of my drawer, and all my bottoms will be referencing one side or the other. It doesn't matter which one. I can do it with either. Make sure that you have no obstructions so everything squares up nicely. From the bottom of my drawer, I want the center of my 1/4 inch router bit, I want the center of my groove to be a 1/2 inch up, and that'll give me some room underneath. And of course then the drawer itself. And of course that is just a preference that I'm doing. So the center of my bit is going to be a 1/2 inch up from there. So we'll go ahead and, now that I blew out the jig and got everything nice and square. We'll readjust this. Now, with this locked in, this piece is trapped. If I was worried about it moving to the side, I could just throw my stop in here and butt right up to it and lock it into place. And since all 4 of my pieces are the same size, that's the one reason that I did that. But I feel confident enough that just these 3 pieces alone are enough to keep me so I can route my grooves quickly and easily. But again, that's why we made that extra stop, that perpendicular stop, to come up against the side of this and lock it in. But again, I feel confident. I don't worry about that. I've got my mark that I just made on my board where I want the center of my bit. I've already got my depth set, so now I'm just going to find my mark, drop my bit, center right on it, and lock my Y limit stops and my Y limit travel into position. And that will not change for all 4 pieces. Everything is set to what I need to do to finish up these drawer sides. Alright, so that's the front and the back. For the sides, all we're going to do is slide this fence down. Throw one side in there. Check your faces, make sure you got the good side in, that you don't want exposed. Make sure that your jig stays clean, especially in this little corner up here, so nothing throws off your measurements. Alright, with that in position, just going to slide this up and trap it into place. My Y limit stop is going to change on this end again for the longer pieces. So there's one of my drawers. I've got nice, looking joints here. Just a very little proudness, perfect for sanding, getting a nice, sanding flush. Let's see if I can pick this up without it going all crazy and stuff. But there you go. All the grooves are perfectly matched for the drawer bottom all the way around. Quick and simple, and I can do this with any size drawers. I mean, I can, as long as I slide my module, my drop-in module, this jig out, I can get as wide as I want, and it's just that quick and simple. Now, if I had to do 50, 60 of these drawers, I could knock them out in no time, with this jig. So there you go. I hope that helps in your next cabinet project. Alright guys, well, like I said, I hope this helps with your next cabinet project. Just a quick and simple jig. Once you've got it, you've got it. It's there to use, and as many drawers as you want. And if I wanted to go wider drawers, for whatever reason, all I do is I just slide my modular away from the guide rail you know, to work with my wider pieces, or if I want to, I can go under the guide rail. I mean, that's the whole purpose of it. But I just made a front and back and 2 sides for the drawer, the groove for the bottom. All it needs now is a little bit of glue and some glue time and dry time, and then you know, I can get to work on other parts such as making my drawer fronts and the rest of the cabinet and all that. So hope this helps. From my shop to yours, happy woodworking, and I'll see you soon.